On today's keynote, we're lucky to be joined by Maria Wolf, who is senior lecturer at Cornell's Nolan School of Hotel Administration. Dr. Wolf argues that every public speaking mishap can be traced back to mistakes that you have made in preparation, and perhaps most importantly, a failure to prepare for the unexpected. Maria, welcome to the studio. So good to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you.
Good. This is going to be a fun conversation. I'm very excited. I'm a little bit nervous today, as I always am every time we do this kind of thing. Public speaking, it's nervy stuff, right?
It is.
It doesn't come easy to most of us.
It is.
To our viewers, I hope you get something out of this today. A couple notes really quickly. This event is being recorded right now. We are live, but it will also be viewable at the same URL afterward. So if you have to bail at any point, or you want to refer a colleague or a friend to what we're doing here today, you can simply share the same URL and the recording will be made available shortly after we're through. I am interested in your questions for Dr. Wolf, so you may submit them in the chat. So if you go to the top right of your video player, you can open it by clicking the dialog box at the top right of the video player. There you'll see the chat. Please, I'm interested in your questions, so submit them there throughout our conversation. We'll take them throughout the conversation. So anytime you have a question, simply drop it there and I will receive them on my iPad here. Throughout the discussion, we will be sharing a few URLs and resources in the chat as well, so heads up for those. And if you're watching the archived recording, the links will be available below in the overview section just below. So there's some interactivity going on here. We are very much interested in who's joining us today. So let's ask the first poll question. You'll see a QR code on your screen. Simply shoot that with your smartphone. The question is, where are you joining us from? I know that typically, almost invariably, we get international audiences, which always makes for a really interesting conversation. I think many of us share some of the same hang-ups and inefficiencies and all those things that go in with public speaking. It's difficult business. But anyway, where are you joining us from? Let's wait to see who's going to join us today. And then we do have a couple follow-up questions that we will be asking throughout the conversation today to get more of a sense of where people's pain points are as it relates to public speaking. So I'm not seeing any results. I think we'll hang on that one for just a moment and see what's going on. Here we go. So we got some Ithacans showing up. Chicago's representing. Vermont, pretty much mostly a domestic audience, it looks like. Somebody's joining us from the Ithaca Commons. So we have Monterrey, Mexico, St. Simon's Island, Hungary. Good, pretty good spread of people. New Jersey representing as always, Warsaw, Poland. Saskatoon, Canada. Shout out to our friends in Saskatoon. So there we go, pretty well mixed audience. People from all over the planet, really healthy showing of domestic audience as well. Okay, let's get into the heart of what we're talking about here. So I want to ask you, audience members, how would you rate your public speaking ability? So we'll stop this one here and see if we can launch the next poll question. How would you rate your public speaking ability? This, of course, is on a 1 to 5 scale. Let's see how it shakes out. You were going to ask me where I put myself. I'm going to put myself in a 3.
In the 3.
I'm in a 3. I'm in a work in progress. This is something that I constantly have to work on. But you, Maria.
Healthy number.
Okay. Yeah. Keeping it simple. Maria, so you hold a PhD in rhetoric and professional communication. You work with business professionals, industry groups. You coach people on speaking and writing as well. Building stage presence, which is a very nuanced, it's not easy to do that as well. Overcoming speech anxiety. What attracted you to public speaking? What is it about your background or experience that led you here today to what we're talking about?
Public speaking is challenging.
Yep.
And I think that this is probably something that interests me the most, is that you have to think through it, you have to make decisions. On the one hand, there are certain rules and certain tips and techniques that could be universal and work for everybody.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's a highly individualized skill. And that's why I actually love working with people individually and coaching them individually on their public speaking skills, because every single person comes in with their own story, with their own sometimes trauma about public speaking that explains a lot about the issues that they're dealing with. And so it's just becoming this very changing, living phenomenon that's against something that sometimes we see in other skills, that's rinse and repeat. So it's
Yeah.
always surprising. It's always different. You never know what you get to work with.
Yeah.
And this is fun. This is just a lot of fun.
Good. Well, I'm so glad you're here to join us. Let's see how we did in the poll. Yeah, so that's where our audience, 54% of our audience says, I'm at about a 3. Only 4% at 5 and 4. Okay. So this is about the distribution we probably expected. No terrible, huge surprises there. So let's get into it. So, I think one of the most important parts about it, you did mention that this is very much an individualistic endeavor. It's nice to have people with you. But what are the ways that we can kind of self-assess our public speaking ability? Is there a methodology? Are there protocols? How do you recommend that we go about it when we say, how am I doing?
Right.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to like my answer.
Uh-oh. Okay.
But a really, really good way to do it is to record yourself.
Yep.
To have someone videotape your presentation and then watch it. And this is painful for a lot of people. Of course, we would love to be praised. We would love to enjoy what we see that we do on the stage. And oftentimes we have this idea that this is what I look like, or this is what I sound like when I present. And then we watch the recording, and how many times you hear people say, I never had any idea that this is how I talk, or this is how I sound.
Yep.
And it's rare that people like the way they look, the way they sound. They just they feel like they're encountering a stranger all of a sudden. Is this me? This is what I look like?
Doesn't even look like me. Right?
Exactly. But this is probably one of the most objective ways to see what works and what doesn't, and to look for patterns. Because again, there are certain things that could work for some people, but maybe they're not going to work for you personally just because that's not your thing.
Yeah.
Or there's certain things that you notice that other people do in way they maybe use their hand gestures, and you start doing that. And then you watch yourself and you see that it's a very awkward pattern and it doesn't look as good, or it doesn't work as well as it did for other people. And you never know until you see it for yourself.
After I shoot these shows, sometimes I go home at night and I look at myself and I do the same things. There's always things that you're going to we have characteristics that always seem to manifest themselves. I usually talk a little too loud. I usually talk too quickly. All those things that come with nervousness in presenting, and I'm sure that's nothing new for you. So when you have students who are filming themselves,
yes.
Does that get you really far, right? Do a lot of things become kind of clear to you once you filmed yourself and watching? It's not a practice that we all do too often. Do people get really good results instantly?
Not instantly. With public speaking, there's really nothing instant. In fact, I see a lot of situations when people feel discouraged when they watch their recording and feel, I'm really disappointed. What I usually say is, why don't you make up 2 lists and start with all the things that you like. Start with that. This is a very healthy place to start.
Sure, right.
Make a list of what you think worked well, where you enjoyed it, something that you said that was engaging, that was interesting, or there was a moment when you really felt proud about your eye contact. I mean, anything, really, anything can work there.
Yeah.
But it's good to have it because this is the list that you can build upon. And then the second list, of course, what could be improved. And this is where it's important also not to go into every single smallest detail, because that could be overwhelming and discouraging. So it's good to look for patterns.
Yes.
What do you see as distracting patterns, annoying patterns, something that you feel that, all right, this is something I can address first, or something that maybe can be fixed easily. You were just not aware of that.
Yes.
So you can look at that and then slowly keep working towards better performance. And it's good to keep recording yourself, because then you can compare and you can keep track of what's changing and what seems to be a really stubborn pattern that maybe you can work with a specialist, or you can get some advice, some help from others, how you can break that pattern.
So let's talk about goal setting as it relates to presentations. Establishing a desired set of outcomes. This is what success looks like to me. How do you think about that when you're coaching people? There's the objective of, I want to just improve the way I publicly speak, and then there's also the goals of the presentation. Do you want to persuade someone? Do you want a certain outcome? How do you kind of get that process moving, and what do you recommend that people do as a first step?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to remember that all the goals come together. So they can't really be separated. So you can't just say, I'm going to work on the content of my presentation and I'm going to deal with the delivery later.
Yeah.
You're just wasting time. So all the time when you could have been working on the delivery while planning your content. You were not using that time. So it's really good to address multiple goals simultaneously, because this is how it happens on the stage.
Yes.
Things happen simultaneously, and your delivery goals contribute to your goals of persuasiveness and other goals. But in terms of the overall goal, I think that it's very important to be intentional. Be very clear what you want to achieve as the result of your presentation. Sometimes I ask a person, what are you trying to accomplish with this speech? What is your goal? What are you going to give to your audience? And they would say, oh, I want to inform them about XYZ.
Yeah.
To inform is not a good goal.
Yeah.
This is something that I usually say, well, why not just send them an email?
Yeah.
If it's simply to inform.
Yeah.
How many meetings have we had?
Yeah.
We call them
Should have been an email.
Should have been an email meeting, right?
Same
when
thing. Okay.
Exactly, when you come to the meeting, you come and you watch those patients where people inform you, or especially on the Zoom, when you sit and you hear the presenter read everything that at that moment you see on the screen.
Sure.
Why?
Yep.
Just to demonstrate that they have great reading skills, or you could have read it yourself and much faster.
Sure.
So simply to inform should not really be the goal, because if your audience has the advantage of receiving information from you and seeing you on the stage as the person, push for something that could be more meaningful. For example, you're coming to the presentation and you're setting the goal that by the end of this meeting or by the end of this presentation, I want you to make the following decision. Or we need to choose 3 top strategies. So whatever that is, or I want you to decide what plan is the best out of the ones that I'm about to present to you. So you need to be very intentional about it, and you need to communicate it to your audience up front, because then they know what they're doing there. They know why they're spending this time with you, and they don't feel like that time is wasted, and they don't sit there wondering, why didn't you just send us an email about it?
Yeah, right.
Right?
And also just a blown opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
You have so many opportunities to do so many things with this seemingly otherwise simple
Absolutely.
presentation,
Yes.
right?
And then it spills over into your delivery skills, because for example, if you're giving a presentation, if you're trying to address people about a very sensitive topic, and you know that there's a lot of anxiety in the room about this topic, and
Sure.
people are nervous, then maybe your tone should be soothing. And
Yeah.
then maybe you want to use hand gestures that could be moving this direction a little bit, right? Like
Yes.
pacify, so to speak.
Yep.
Versus you have a goal to really inspire people, to really convince them, to have this faith in your idea. Then, of course, you're going to adjust your gestures. You adjust your gestures. You're going to use stronger gestures. Then your voice should match that goal. So everything comes together. So you can't really separate that, or you really shouldn't separate that.
Yeah, exactly. I want to go to the audience here and ask a couple questions, Maria. What is one area, this is for you audience, that you'd like to improve upon the most? This will come in the form of a word cloud as well. See if you can keep it into one word. Again, I think it's kind of interesting I think that we're probably going to see that many people feel like they have the same shortcomings, right? The usual suspects,
Yes.
nervousness. For me, for instance, it's just kind of general organization of thought. That's something that I kind of always think about. What's the flow going to be like? How am I going to block this out in an outline form? You know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't think linearly all the time, and that's kind of the way some of these shows go, actually, to tell you the truth. But
Yeah.
that's something that I'm always conscious of, and it's something that I really want to work on. So here we go. Nervousness, of course, jumping out at us as a pretty big one. Eliminating notes, that's aspirational. I have some questions related to that. Filler words, right? Voice inflection, distraction, poise, self-doubt, right? So that's something that is always kind of difficult to overcome. Fear, eye contact, really nice one too. Good. So these are all pretty serious pain points and completely varied, kind of all over the place. Okay, let's take it in a little more of a positive, self-reinforcing direction. And I want to ask you, audience, what do you perceive as your greatest strength as a public speaker? I don't know. What would you think that people usually say in response to something like this? I'm
In terms of
relatable
the
and fun.
in terms of the weaknesses,
Yeah.
I think that nervousness usually comes as number one.
Sure.
That people feel nervous.
Yeah.
Public speaking is not everybody's favorite
Yep.
thing to do in life. Strength, this is really something that varies. I mean, I work with business students.
Yep.
So a lot of them have had experience with public speaking, and so they list this experience as one of their strengths.
Yep.
People who don't have that experience are not going to, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that given how our audience comes from all different directions and
Yeah.
places, and I assume backgrounds,
Yep.
it will be interesting to see what the top choice that they mention.
Here we go. So these are our greatest strengths among our viewers. Energy. That's kind of a really cool one.
That's great.
Preparation. Yes, absolutely. In fact, this whole thing is kind of about being prepared for the unexpected. Knowledge-based storytelling, friendliness, clarity, content. These are all great, right? And these are all things that we should all aspire to bring to our public speaking toolbox. Being relaxed was another one.
Yes.
That's a talent unto itself if you
Right.
can do that, right?
Right. And I'm glad that people are saying preparation, because also it's always interesting to talk about what different people mean by preparation,
Yeah.
because there are multiple different interpretations of that.
Speaking of preparation, right? So you can't really get started until you know what your objectives are. So do you think about, audience is a key thing, right?
Yes.
How do you recommend that we think about tuning our presentation to a particular audience? Sometimes you have to deliver the same presentation to multiple audiences
Yes.
with different cohorts altogether. Today you're going to be talking to a bunch of middle schoolers about this topic, and tomorrow you're going to be presenting to a bunch of scientists who, whose research you use to make your case. Anyway, various audiences. How do we think about audience when we're in the organizational preparatory phase in the beginning?
Yes, your audience consideration is really number one task
Yeah.
that anyone who is preparing to give a presentation should consider.
Yeah.
From the examples that you, Chris, gave me, middle schoolers versus scientists, of course, we're talking about the complexity level,
Yeah.
right? The language that you choose, the examples that you bring. But when we don't have that huge discrepancy in the audience, then what you really want to look into is their attitudes about the topic or about the idea that you are proposing,
Yeah.
and their perspective, what history they've had with this idea, what their daily responsibilities look like, how they feel about it. Are they indifferent? Are they happy with the way things are? Are they openly against this idea?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and then you basically mold your argument accordingly. I had an experience working with professionals, with business professionals who were giving me examples of unsuccessful presentations and telling me how they were introducing a new component of operations and introducing it to hotel property owners and giving them all kinds of background and how the system is going to work and all of that. And they received a huge pushback and they were surprised by that. But the reason behind that was that those owners did not understand why this new idea is necessary because they thought the current system works fine.
Sure.
So they were happy with the way things are. And so all the information that the speakers were giving them about the new system became irrelevant to them because they just could not connect it to their present situation. So the correct approach should have been that we need to compare the two systems side by side and highlight the advantages, the benefits of the new one in comparison to the old one. Not that the old one is bad, but the new one is better.
Right.
And so that would have been the smart way to go about it. So it really comes down to not what I want to say, but more what does my audience want to hear.
Right.
And that's what that's what you want to give to them, and that's how you want to consider, how you want to package that so that it's palatable to them, so that that's something that they find acceptable, exciting, interesting, worthy. An important question to ask, what's in it for them?
Yes, right.
Right? So
everything.
Exactly. So what's your value proposition? If you're just going there and you're giving them information, there's no value in that. So you have to really nail it. And you have to do it early in the presentation, because if you're saving it until the very end or the middle, you already lost them. You already lost them. So oftentimes it's not a good idea to go through a lot of the background information, long introduction, because you are missing a really precious opportunity to capture your audience early and to hold them tight.
Yeah.
Right? So by giving them that value proposition as early as you can, and then building the rest of your content accordingly, right? Just to intensify it.
You know, at the end of our conversation today, we're going to ask our audience to give us some feedback. How did we do? Will be the question, right? So you give us a rating 1 to 5 with some supportive or, some information on how we could do better, maybe some things we did good.
Yes.
Did well. So I really believe in feedback. You know what I mean? And do you build that into the presentations that you do? Is that part of it? I know that it's a modern practice, and technologically, it's so much easier to do than it used to be. How do you think about feedback, and how do you go about getting it meaningful?
Feedback is very important because this is your measurement, right? This is your measurement. So you want to think about the feedback in different ways. First of all, think about what happens after you give that presentation. What happens after you give your speech? This could be the way to measure your success in the form of the feedback. So you can't really say that I was successful in delivering my presentation, I remembered everything I wanted to say, if the audience, as a result, if the audience doesn't do what you wanted them to do. So if you get the result that you wanted, then you were successful. Even though you may misspoken maybe, or you were not as confident, but you got the result that you wanted, great, you were successful. No one is perfect, you can do better next time. But now you also want to think about the feedback that can help you get to that place where you do better. And a really important thing here is to signal to your audience very explicitly and very openly that you want their feedback. We love being praised, right? It makes us feel good when people tell us you did a great job. It really works well for our self-esteem in terms of growth, the actual change it's not very productive.
Sure.
So it's important to ask people for more of a balanced feedback. I'll give you one example. I would give a presentation and then I would go to the person, for example, that I know in the audience, that I trust that person, and I would ask them something very specific. I would tell them, give me 3 things that you found to be particularly successful in what I did this time, and give me 3 things that you believe could have been better, or I should be able to do better next time I do it. So when you give people something very concrete, very specific, and you give them green light to be critical, then they don't feel bad about giving you criticism. You know, usually people don't want to hurt your feelings, and even if you did something wrong, they're not going to tell you. Unless you ask for it.
That's right.
So it's very important to be open to it. It's very important to be grateful when you receive that feedback. Not get defensive, but really, really be grateful. And maybe even have some further conversation about how those things could be improved. Again, because the other person's perspective is really important. The way we view ourselves is very different from the reality. So getting feedback is crucial.
Yeah, exactly. Being reflective is not as easy. No. And you're absolutely right about the green light thing. People will be generous. They will be helpful. And they will be honest. If you tell them, I really need you to be honest here. You know what I mean? If you care about me at all. You know.
Yes. And by the way, for all of the people in our audience who feel nervous about presentations, I have to tell you that in general, and there are studies about it that prove that the audience is very forgiving. The audience is not judging. They're not sitting there writing down every single mistake that you make or every single little mishap that they see in the presentation. So they're very welcoming. They're very forgiving. They actually sympathize with you because they feel, I'm happy that I'm not in your shoes. I'm not the one giving presentations. So just think about it, that they usually are on your side and they're not there to judge. And that's why for people sometimes it's hard to give constructive feedback because they feel like they don't want to hurt your feelings. And sometimes they just can't even come up with something that they didn't like. Right? They appreciate, they admire people who come up there on the stage and do this thing.
I had a presentation recently, it was a couple months ago, where the stakes were high. I had to present to a bunch of important people. And I made several mistakes, and I kind of knew it when I was even doing it. I was speaking too quickly, I was going through slides too quickly, everything was just moving right along. I wanted to get it done, and I was excited, and I was enthused, and I was proud of what I was talking about. But, you know, universally, the feedback came back. You should really just kind of take a break once in a while. And allow for some interactivity with the audience. We don't always have the opportunity to do that, right? I think if you're a keynote speech and you're up at a podium and you're speaking to an industry organization or something, interactivity isn't always a thing. But I came away from it thinking, I'm going to do that every time. To pause and say, any questions? What do you think?
You control your presentation. You're 100% in charge. So yes, I know that there are certain expectations or certain formal ways to do things, but there's no rule that says that you cannot break it. You can break those expectations. You can do something different. In fact, oftentimes your audience would appreciate it because they get tired of the same old. And if you do something that surprises them, that makes them feel that you value their presence, that you want to hear from them, that they're meaningful, I believe that that could be very, very important. So I think that you probably want to look at your presentation and decide where you are getting into some dense information, into some information that might take time for people to process, to think about it, to maybe make their own conclusion and then move on.
Yep.
And those could be really great places where you can pause.
Yep.
You can give yourself a break, catch your own breath, slow down, look at the audience, invite for questions if you want.
Yep.
Or sometimes you could simply ask them, are we all good here? Are we
Yes.
moving along?
Right.
Is the pace all right? It's okay to do that because they can give you the feedback
Yep.
that ultimately will turn your presentation into a better performance. And that's really what matters, because again, it's not about you, it's about them, it's about the audience, it's about what works for them. And sometimes it's a smart thing to check with them. Is this working for you? Are we good? Yes.
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
Yeah.
So, and that would be great.
It completely changed the game. I'm never going back to not doing it that way. We are 30 minutes through. I want to just talk to our audience really quickly. I see some questions are coming in.
Good.
Please submit some questions, and we'll take them in just a few minutes. There are a few that I want to get to here. We're not all comedians here, but I've heard that putting a little self-deprecating humor in the beginning of your presentation sometimes breaks the ice, cools you off a little bit, brings the audience into your space. I don't really do this with any kind of formal way, but I don't know. What do you think about that little hook in the beginning? Is that a cheap kind of thing, or is it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a cheap thing if it's a cliche.
I suppose, right?
If it's a cliche.
I flew in and my arms are tired or something. Yeah.
But you know what, Chris, you're right that the way you open your presentation is hugely important.
Yeah.
It's very, very important because
Right.
that's the moment when you have people's attention.
Yep.
They're with you. And you don't want to fumble it away. You want to use it. You want to capitalize on that moment. In terms of the humor and in terms of jokes, humor and jokes would be great if you know that you can pull it off.
Right. So maybe if you've road tested it with your friends or done video and say, does this joke work? I don't know.
Well,
Do you,
your friends is your comfort zone.
maybe.
Right? They would be your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Your audience might not be your comfort zone, so
Sure.
your brain might actually play a dirty trick on you.
Oh.
That, your brain might just
Okay.
go into the freezing mode because these are not your friends. I would say that my rule of thumb is that don't do anything in the big presentation that you personally don't feel comfortable with, or you don't feel like it's you.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't want to fake it. You don't want to pretend to be someone who you're not, because then it doesn't feel good to you, and how could it look good for the audience? So jokes are fine if you're good at that. And also let's consider that humor is not always appropriate. Right?
Sure,
There are
yeah.
certain topics where there's nothing funny about it, and it would not be a good idea to start with a joke
Sure.
or anything.
Right.
So, but again, going to my earlier point that your opening matters, just think about it that what can you do at the beginning that, again, grabs your audience, that is something different, something that breaks away from the pattern. The typical way people start presentations: hello, my name is so and so, I'm happy to see you all here.
Yeah.
Or even worse, those who may know me or not know me, here is my name. That's boring, right?
Sure.
Your name probably, if you're presenting with the slides, your name is there on the slides anyway.
Yes.
So people
Right.
can read. And so what you might want to consider is, could there be a one-liner, something that you can use to open your presentation
Right.
that sets the bar right there and sets the tone?
Yep.
And then you dance from there.
That's a very special skill.
It's a special skill. I'll give you one example that comes to my mind, and that's something that we watched with students recently when Steve Jobs was introducing MacBook Air. So he was doing the product reveal, famous speech, but his opening line was, and that MacBook Air, so it's light, it's the lightest computer, but his opening line was, "There's something in the air." And then he paused.
Yeah.
And he let his fans,
Sure.
cheer and be happy. But think about it, because it does set the bar. Sometimes that opening line could be something that asks your audience to get serious, right? Or to feel alarmed,
Yes.
or to pay attention because something needs to be completed as the result of that presentation.
Right.
So whatever it is, think about it that this is something that sets the tone. And also, again, remember that what I mentioned earlier, the value proposition,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that could be a good way to start presentation. What did you bring to them today? What is the value that you're proposing? Why? How can you make this time that they spend with you worth it? Right? What's going to be return on their time investment with you today?
Yeah.
So imagine if you open your presentation with something that signals to them that this is valuable, this is what you're going to get out of it. Right? You can say, by the end of this presentation, this is going to happen,
Yeah.
or this is how you all are going to feel, or
Sure.
you will be thinking differently about something, right? So that's that could be probably a more interesting and engaging way to start it. So not necessarily humor.
Yeah, exactly. Good advice. I want to ask the audience another question here. If we could bring up this other poll question. I'm asking the audience, do you have a system for or a method for dealing with nervousness? Whether they're tricks, breathing exercises, walking stairs, meditation, tequila,
Medication.
whatever it might be, medication. Let's ask the audience what their take is. So here are my answers, Maria. I have a system, and I'm still nervous. I have a system. There we go. I have no system, and I'm a wreck. I have no system, but I tend to get nervous anyway. I have nerves of steel. Nothing scares me. Nobody's responding in that kind of way. So people do have a system, a protocol that this appears to be the way that it's shaking out. Do you think people mostly have a system for dealing with their nervousness? Do we all have our individual way of going about it? I talked to a music professor who years ago just told me, get your breathing in line, right? It'll control your pace, your heart rate, adrenaline will be managed if you can just get a hold of your breathing. Walk some stairs, do this or that. It never really helped me in any real way. So people do seem to have a system. What do you think? This is the
But
golden
they're saying,
question.
and I'm still nervous.
And I'm still nervous. Okay, what do you think of that result?
First of all, to all of you who still feel nervous, don't necessarily think that nervousness is always a bad thing, because it's not. In fact, I would not encourage anyone to completely get rid of feeling nervous, because that might backfire. People who feel absolutely no nervousness oftentimes come across as not caring, arrogant,
Okay, sure.
too laid back,
Yeah.
unprofessional,
Ah.
and that's really the last thing that you want. So maintaining just a little bit of that edge, this nervousness, can help you keep your energy up, can help you make your voice sound louder when needed, can help you use more hand gestures, because when you have this nervousness, you have this extra adrenaline, it needs some outlet, and oftentimes it happens with gestures. So nervousness is good. The idea is, how do you channel it in a positive way, in a productive way? And this is where I think we come to this concept of public speaking being a very individual skill. I would say that an important thing to keep in mind is try to understand what triggers your nervousness. So go to the root cause. Try to think where it comes from, because that's exactly what you want to address. Some people say, I am nervous. I'm afraid that I will forget something. Or I'll forget what I was going to say.
Sure.
Then I usually ask them to take me back to their preparation process. And we spoke about preparation process because people have different definitions of that. And I ask them, how did you prepare? What is it that you're afraid to forget? And I would say that 9 times out of 10, they tell me that they had prepared the script and they memorized the script and they're afraid that they will forget something. And then my advice is toss the script. Don't write the script, because if you write the script and you memorize it and then you're afraid to forget something, you're literally creating this perfect storm. You're creating this situation for yourself that makes you feel nervous because you did it to yourself. You wrote it, you memorized it, and now you feel this pressure that you have to literally utter every single word, every single sentence that you had there. Who cares in the audience? Who cares? Who knows that script? No one knows that script. You're the only one who knows the script. So if you miss something, who cares? They will never know that. So maybe just toss it and instead think about your key points. Think about your key elements, key concepts that you want to discuss with people. Dealing with nervousness oftentimes has to do with reframing your mind. And sometimes even what I would suggest is stop thinking about your presentations as this performance, when you have to be perfect or you have to do things in just this particular way, because none of that is true. First of all, you'll never be perfect, so forget about that. There's always going to be something that's going to go not exactly the way you planned, and that's okay. That's how we're humans. And in terms of the preparation, think about it not as performance, but as a conversation. You're going there to have a conversation with people. You have some ideas that you want to discuss with them, or you can think about it as a teaching opportunity. You have some new information that you know about and those people don't, and you want to teach them about it. So how would you teach that versus how do you present that?
I see.
How would you explain it? And the really good approach would be to take this mindset into your preparation. So instead of preparing the script and just going over it again and again and again in that exact format, imagine that each time you have to explain the same idea or the same proposal to a different person, and you have to explain it slightly differently. What if you have to explain it to a group of middle schoolers? Then you would explain it like this. What if you have to explain it to a group of scientists? Then it would go like this. So, and each time try to change it up, because basically what you're doing is that you're teaching your brain that it's okay to not just always follow the strict, very, very strict format that you created for yourself. This is not how we communicate to begin with, right? You and I today, we had our set of questions. We had some discussions, we had some preparations, but we're stepping left and right from it, and that's okay, because this is how the conversation goes. This is how naturally we communicate, and this is our comfort zone. And then you're going to start feeling more like, I'm just talking to people. And then that pressure that makes you nervous is getting a little bit lower, and it's released, and you're letting it go. And just be kind on yourself with that, because if you are not kind, then who is going to be?
I love the through line that I'm hearing here is that your emphasis on individualism, which I think is really kind of interesting, because I don't know if we all think about it in the same way. I have a question from Tara Lex, who asks, where do you draw the line between improving your skills and accepting some quirks that are just yours as an individual? There's always a balance to be stricken, but your emphasis on individuality is It's really enlightening. I really kind of dig it. So what about the quirks?
Yeah.
They can be strengths.
They could be. They could
Yeah.
be. So I think that the question is this something that that makes your presentation stronger, more relatable? Or is this something that's working against you? And if this is something that's off-putting, because if it comes with a negative connotation, that you want to work on it. You want to remember that, especially if you give this presentation in the workplace, or the people who are sitting in the audience, they know you more or less, then you really don't want to create those two different personalities.
Yes,
that
right.
on the stage you act a certain way, you behave a certain way, you present certain way, and then off stage in the hallway, all of a sudden you're a different person, because that's just weird, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And then also the problem is that people will think that you're fake. That you're just fake in that presentation.
Sure, right.
And then they're going to question your integrity, and they're going to question your ideas.
Yeah.
Because they think that this is just a show that you're putting up there. So you want to preserve that individual side of who you are.
Yep.
And you want to take all of the personal strengths that you have as a communicator and simply try to elevate them to the next level. So it's not going to be, I would say, the perfect presentation, but let's say it's going to be a more polished presentation, a more refined presentation, when you build up on the skills that are positive and you address the features that are taken away from your speech and something that becomes distracting, then this is something that you want to work on. But I really would discourage people to think about presentations as, there's one set or there's one standard, because you don't want to get into the, sometimes we see those cookie cutter presentations or cookie cutter speakers, and they're forgettable. They're forgettable. They're just all look the same. They all sound the same, and there's nothing impactful there. On the other hand, if you think about all of the great public speakers, they're all different. They're all different. They're very unique. And say certain things that, I don't know, Steve Jobs could do, maybe I cannot, and you cannot, and other people cannot, but some can. And certain things would be different. So it's a good balance to work on, for sure.
The subtitle of today's talk is called Preparing for the Unexpected, and it's taken us a little while to get there, but how do we plan for failure? I think about this when I put something together. I say, imagine the worst, try to prepare so that you can do your best. But I don't know, you have some anecdotes about failure, epic failures.
Oh, yeah, I do. Well, I would say a lot of people are afraid of failure. And they say, what if something happens? What if something happens? And that triggers nervousness too. That increases our anxiety. When you go in and you're thinking, oh gosh, what if I forget this? Or what if this happens? This is not a healthy way to deal with that, because you're not dealing with it.
I see.
The good way to think about is, when this happens, what am I going to do? So, because things will happen. We all have those stories in our lives when something went wrong. PowerPoint crashed. Yeah, I'll tell you that one. But other things as well. And so it's just a matter of time when it's going to happen, because this is life. Again, nothing is perfect. So the best way to deal with that is simply prepare. So plan for the worst case scenario, or plan for multiple scenarios. If this happens, what am I going to do? If this happens, what am I going to do? And then practice for that, rehearse for that. So my story that I had, it was a technology failure. I was scheduled to give a presentation at a conference, and I had my PowerPoint set up, and we had to present in blocks of 3 people. So it was about an hour long panel, and each person had their time and 5 minutes in between for Q&A, and so the next person would present. And I was scheduled to go last. So 2 speakers presented before me, and they took a little bit longer. And by the way, that could be another question that we could discuss, what to do if you're running out of time.
Yeah.
So they took a little bit longer, and so by the time it came to me, we were already running against the clock, and the computer failed. So the computer the whole system just shut down, and all my slides disappeared.
Okay.
And there was a tech person on the side who started working on it and tried to fix it. And we're all sitting there waiting for him to fix it. And I'm looking at my clock, and I'm at my watch, and I'm thinking, all right, 2 minutes wasted, 3 minutes wasted, and I'm running out of time.
And there's an audience sitting there.
And they're sitting there waiting patiently.
Sure.
And I already have less time than everybody else. And then I said, you know what, forget it. Let me talk to you. And I just gave my presentation without the slides. I just decided, it was about my research, and I just decided I'm going to share all of the fun things that I discovered in this research project, and how we thought about it, and what my next plans are. And so I just talked to the audience, and that was it. So it turned out that it worked very well. So I had one person in the audience who approached me afterwards and said, that was so interesting. Would you like to write a chapter for the book that I'm editing right now? Because that would fit us so well. So
Yeah.
you just have to do it. And again, you have to be mentally prepared, but also you have to rehearse for that. So to all of you who are working with PowerPoint presentations, here's a very quick advice. If you cannot deliver your argument without the slides, you're not prepared. You don't have your argument. You have to be able to do it. If someone wakes you up in the middle of the night and asks you, hey, can you give me 3 minutes? Tell me what it is about. And boom, you go. You have to be able to do it. Otherwise, no, just don't fool yourself. You're not prepared.
You know, this one of the questions that I had in the queue here was about visual presentations. And I think you answered the question in such a beautiful way, which is, don't lean on your visual presentation too hard.
Right.
And this is, you just demonstrated exactly why you need to do that.
Yes.
That's interesting, because I don't think a lot of people do that. I think they put all of their, you know what I mean? Everything is going into the deck. Here are my notes. It's all there.
Yeah.
I need to.
You know why?
Yeah.
Because it's a script.
Yeah.
Because they're using it as a crutch. They're creating it
Yeah.
as a script, and they're thinking, if I forget something, I'm just going to look at the slides.
Yeah.
The slides are not for the speaker. The slides are for the audience. It is a tool that helps your audience to follow you.
Yeah.
So if you literally write almost your whole presentation on the slides, then I'm sorry, you're disposable. You're not needed in that room as a speaker.
Right.
Everybody can read. So you're just demonstrating to them your wonderful reading skills, and it's not going to work towards your credibility at all. So try to use less words there. They make it more of the visual.
Sure.
Think about how to look at each slide and think about the key takeaway and put it up front there, and that's it. And then when you work on the presentation, I would recommend that the slides should be the last thing that you work on. So work on your argument first. Think through that. Talk through that. So once you get an idea about what you want to present on, start literally talking through that out loud. When you're in the shower, talk to yourself. When you're walking on the street, you have your phone, you're listening to your music or something. But talk through that.
Yeah.
And when you have a really, really good grasp of your argument minus the slides, then you can start putting things on the presentation slides, because then you feel very independent from your slides.
Yeah.
And when you're ready to rehearse with the slides, that's another little trick. When people ask me, I struggle so much not to rely on the slides. I have this habit that I know the information, but I keep turning to the slides.
Yes.
How do I fight it?
Yeah.
As always, I ask them, tell me how you rehearse. Walk me through your preparation. And 10 times out of 10, they tell me that they rehearse while looking at their computer, while looking at the slides.
Yep.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
You're training your brain. You're literally training your brain to present while looking at the slides. Then how can you expect your brain to start acting differently on the stage and not look at the slides? Because you spend so much time training it to do just that.
Yeah, right.
So that means that you probably want to rehearse without looking on the slides. So your slides are going to be behind your back? Great. That's where your computer should be. And invest into the remote, in the clicker, and that's how you rehearse, with a clicker in your hand, because oftentimes people also say, I don't know what to do with my hands, and then when I have this remote, it feels weird. Rehearse with the remote so you don't feel weird.
Yeah.
And then you feel better prepared to handle those slides, because you feel like, okay, I'm just talking by looking at people. Even better if you have people sitting in front of you when you rehearse, and you train your eyes on the people and not on the slides. Then you're closer to the success.
Yeah, exactly. You are a faculty author for a few courses that are available at our website through the university. Impactful Unscripted Communication is one of them. Tell me about that.
It's an interesting course. It has to do with the fact that I would say most of the communication that we engage in is improvised. It's unscripted. When we think on the feet, when we have to still present ourselves in the best light possible, sometimes win the argument or win people over with our ideas, and it's not a formal presentation. Which doesn't mean that you should not be prepared. You still need to be prepared. And so this is what the course does. It helps you prepare for those circumstances. But also I would say it helps you to prepare for what we're discussing, for the unexpected. Because in formal presentation, those things happen. We try to practice and rehearse for the best case scenario. That usually doesn't occur. So the idea is that you prepare for the worst case scenario, because this is when you train your brain to be flexible, think on your feet, adjust, watch your audience, watch their reaction. If they look bored, if they start checking something on their phones, it's on you. You need to change something. It's not on them. Don't blame the audience. It's always on you. So this is really what the course does. So it gives you this structured approach, strategic approach, what components to consider when you practice for those circumstances, for those situations, and how to do it in the most effective way.
Very much related to what we've been discussing today. And there are a couple other course links that we're going to drop in there: virtual communication, and then pointing to the larger business communication Cornell certificate program. Thank you for your contributions to those. So this takes us to my favorite segment of the day, called What'd You Bring? Maria, what did you bring to today's conversation? I wanted to be able to share something that's useful with our audience. You went right to the HBR guide.
Yes. So I'm walking the walk today because I mentioned earlier that when you talk to people, you need to give them something that's worth their time, right? What's in it for them, something that they feel, okay, we haven't just wasted the time. And so I thought, what could be an additional value that I could deliver today? One of the most common questions I receive is, what else can I do? Where else can I go and learn more about public speaking skills? And the book that I brought today is Harvard Business Review Guide to Persuasive Presentations by Nancy Duarte. And I brought my copy because you can see how I read it, so it's full of sticky notes. I refer to it when I teach my students. I refer to it when I prepare my own presentations and my work. So, Nancy, if you are watching our talk today, we haven't met personally, but I would love to have a chance to chat with you and see how we can learn from each other, because this is amazing. So anyone who is interested, I think that if you really feel committed to elevating your skills in persuasive speaking, persuasive presentations,
Sure.
this is a really, really solid resource. I highly recommend it.
Beautiful, good. We'll share the link to the publisher site. I brought something that's not related to public speaking at all. I just brought something that I thought was cool. I've been checking out this book, The Secret Lives of Color by Cassia St. Clair. This is from the website copy. This is a beautiful book. You can see that some of the pages are noted with color coding, right? So you can kind of go through the entire spectrum. These are 75 shades, dyes, and hues. They all have scientific significance, cultural. It's absolutely beautiful. Very easy to read. Each color is kind of covered in 3 or so pages. If you're just kind of curious about any the impact of color through the ages, we talked about some of the the imperial purples, the saffron robes, yellows, and so on. So just a fascinating book. If you're just interested in color, which I imagine most people would be, check out The Secret Lives of Color by Cassia St. Clair. That's what I brought today. Maria Wolf, that's been a ton of fun. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I learned a lot, and audience, I hope you learned a lot as well. Remember, we're going to have a post-event survey here. Shoot your smartphone at the QR code there, and we'll ask you to give us some ratings here. Let us know how we did, and then there's a follow-up question about specifics, because I want to know some constructive feedback pointers that you can give me today. Thank you so much, Maria. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you, audience. We'll see you soon.